Good morning, Alex and friends. I'm Grace. Today is Thursday, September 11th, 2025, and you're listening to Alex's News. The weather in Riverside will reach a comfortable high of 79.6 degrees today, with a low of 64.0 degrees overnight, promising a pleasant day and evening. After the break, we will be exploring the significant implications of the Charlie Kirk assassination, examining what this event could mean for the future of political violence and its impact on our society. We'll also break down what Trump's tariffs could mean for consumer prices across the U.S. and for the Federal Reserve's economic strategies, a crucial topic for your wallet. All these vital stories and more are coming up here on Alex's News. Don't go anywhere. We begin this morning with profound news from Utah. Conservative activist Charlie Kirk was assassinated yesterday. Our national reporter Ethan is here with the details. Ethan, who was Kirk, and why is his death so significant?
Grace, Charlie Kirk, just 31, was a leading right-wing voice. He co-founded and was CEO of Turning Point USA, or TPUSA, in 2012, growing it into a major conservative media operation mobilizing young Republican voters, according to PBS NewsHour and Time magazine. A close ally of President Donald Trump, Kirk also hosted The Charlie Kirk Show. He is survived by his wife, Erica Franzwe, and 2 children, confirmed by CBS News.
A shocking loss. What happened at Utah Valley University? And what about those final moments?
Grace, yesterday, September 10, 2025, Kirk spoke at a TPUSA American Comeback Tour event in Orem, Utah, with 3,000 attendees, as reported by MSNBC. While discussing gun violence, a single long-distance shot rang out. Videos reportedly show Kirk grasping his neck as blood appeared. Rushed by security, he tragically died from his injuries. This account comes from PBS NewsHour and CBS News.
Devastating. What about the search for the shooter and any leads?
Grace, the shooter, wearing dark clothing, fired from a rooftop and remains at large. No group has claimed responsibility. Initial arrests were retracted. An individual was released, as FBI Director Kash Patel confirmed to the Washington Post. A new person of interest is now sought. The Utah Department of Public Safety, FBI, and local police lead the investigation, urging tips at fbi.gov/Utah Valley shooting. They emphasize this was a, quote, targeted attack toward one individual, end quote.
So, still at large, how has the political world reacted, especially given Governor Spencer Cox's strong condemnation?
The reaction has been intense, Grace. Utah Governor Spencer Cox called it a, quote, political assassination, a, quote, dark day for our state, end quote, highlighting escalating political violence, according to PBS NewsHour. President Trump praised Kirk as, quote, the great, and even legendary, end quote, ordering flags lowered until September 14, 2025, just 3 days from now. He blamed the, quote, radical left, end quote. Democrats, including California Governor Gavin Newsom, also denounced the violence. This is a somber turning point for political discourse.
A truly somber turning point, Ethan. Thank you for these critical updates.
My pleasure, Grace.
That was Ethan, reporting on the tragic assassination of Charlie Kirk, story 1 of 2. We'll have more news after the break. We turn now to a story that's truly putting the squeeze on American households and policymakers alike. The nation's economic picture is becoming increasingly complex, particularly with rising consumer prices. This is largely attributed to President Donald Trump's sweeping tariffs on imported goods, creating a challenging dilemma for the Federal Reserve as it deliberates on interest rate decisions. Meanwhile, the White House maintains a contrasting view, asserting that inflation is under control and unaffected by these tariffs. Joining us to help untangle this intricate economic knot is our financial reporter, Chloe. Chloe, thanks for being here. Let's start with the latest August inflation data released yesterday.
Grace, it's certainly a sticky situation we're watching closely. Economists had widely forecasted an uptick in U.S. inflation for August. A survey by FactSet, reported by ABC News, projected consumer prices to have increased by 2.9% annually, up from 2.7% in July. Core inflation, which excludes volatile food and energy costs to give a clearer picture of underlying price trends, was expected to have risen 3.1% year over year, matching July's rate. Both figures were anticipated to exceed the Federal Reserve's 2% inflation target.
So what did the official numbers from the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics actually tell us? Did we hit those forecasts?
Not entirely, Grace. As reported by Gemini 2.5 Flash, the official Consumer Price Index, or CPI, for August 2025 showed an annual increase of 2.7%, remaining steady from July. This was actually below the 2.9% forecast. However, the core CPI, which, as I mentioned, strips out food and energy, did align with forecasts, remaining at 3.1% annually and rising 0.3% month on month.
And what about the Producer Price Index, or PPI, which measures average changes in selling prices received by domestic producers?
That's where things get even more nuanced. In contrast to consumer price trends, the Producer Price Index for final demand actually saw a seasonally adjusted decrease of 0.1% in August, undershooting economist expectations of a 0.3% monthly gain. On an unadjusted annual basis, the PPI rose 2.6%, significantly below the 3.3% annual increase economists had predicted, as noted by Gemini 2.5 Flash.
So, Chloe, despite the actual CPI coming in slightly below forecasts, there's a strong consensus among independent economic analysts that President Trump's tariffs are directly contributing to rising U.S. consumer prices. How exactly are these tariffs impacting our wallets?
That's right, Grace. Independent economic analysts are singing a different tune than the White House. According to Gemini 2.5 Flash, citing Morningstar and Investopedia, the pass-through effects of these tariffs, which are essentially import taxes, are a primary driver. Economists expected this pass-through to accelerate as businesses had largely depleted their pre-tariff inventories, meaning more direct price increases for consumers. Goldman Sachs, for instance, projected that by October, producers would pass 2/3 of the tariffs onto consumers.
Can you give us some specific examples of what we're paying more for?
Certainly, we're seeing it across the board. Gasoline costs rose 1% from May to June, and grocery prices saw a 0.3% increase in June, and were up 2.4% annually, according to Reuters and ABC News. Orange prices surged 3.5% from May to June, and tomato prices increased 3.3% in July due to duties on Mexican imports. For manufactured goods, tariff-related price increases were noted for apparel and furniture, with furniture prices jumping 1.3%, appliances 1.9%, and computers 1.4% in June 2025, as reported by Ground News and AP News.
That sounds like a heavy price tag for households and businesses. How substantial is the overall economic burden from these tariffs?
It's quite significant, Grace. The Center for American Progress estimates these tariffs could cost the typical U.S. household an average of $2,400 per year. Small businesses, the backbone of our economy, faced over $90,000 in tariff costs between April and July 2025 alone. A LendingTree survey further indicated that 1/3 of U.S. businesses anticipate price increases in the last quarter of the year due to tariff concerns. JP Morgan CEO Jamie Dimon even expressed pessimism about the economy, stating, as reported by Al Arabiya Net, that the full impact of the tariffs is, quote, still coming down the road, end quote.
That's certainly a concern. Now let's turn to the Federal Reserve. They operate under a dual mandate promoting maximum employment and maintaining price stability. How does this rising inflation complicate their upcoming meeting next week?
This is indeed the Fed's tightrope walk, Grace. Typically, the Fed would cut interest rates when unemployment rises to stimulate growth, but raise or maintain rates when inflation is high. Recent government reports, as detailed by ABC News, indicate a sharp slowdown in hiring, and the unemployment rate ticked up to a still low 4.3% in August. This, combined with persistent inflation above their 2% target, creates a complex policy challenge. President Trump has relentlessly pressured the Fed to reduce its short-term interest rate, which currently stands at 4.3%, to spur borrowing and economic growth.
And Fed Chair Jerome Powell, in August, hinted at potential rate cuts. How does he view the impact of tariffs on inflation?
He's been quite clear. According to reporting from PBS and YouTube by Gemini 2.5 Flash, Powell has acknowledged that tariffs are, quote, highly likely, end quote, to lead to, quote, at least a temporary rise in inflation, end quote, and that their effects on consumer prices are, quote, clearly visible, end quote, and expected to, quote, accumulate, end quote. He also suggested that tariffs might cause a one-time price increase rather than ongoing inflation, which would make rate cuts easier. This distinction is crucial. A temporary, one-time price level increase means prices rise due to a specific shock and then stabilize. Sustained, ongoing inflation, however, is a continuous upward movement. The Fed's obligation, as Powell has stated, is to, quote, make certain that a one-time increase does not become an ongoing inflation problem, end quote. Wall Street investors, according to CME FedWatch, anticipate 3 Fed rate cuts this year.
It's a delicate balance. Meanwhile, the White House has maintained a position sharply at odds with independent economists, claiming there's no inflation. They've even stated that President Trump has, quote, defeated Joe Biden's inflation crisis, end quote. How do they explain this, given the data you've shared?
It's a significant divergence, Grace. The White House has highlighted a decline in wholesale prices for energy goods and services in August, asserting that tariffs have not resulted in consumer price hikes. They've even stated, as reported by American Progress and The Independent, that tariffs have resulted in, quote, massive amounts of cash pouring into our Treasury's coffers, end quote. However, this stance is directly contradicted by the prevailing sentiment and analysis from a broad spectrum of independent economic experts, as noted by Gemini 2.5 Flash, citing Morningstar and Investopedia.
And why the disparity? How can the producer price index be falling while the consumer price index is still rising due to tariffs?
That's a great question, Grace, and it boils down to several economic factors. First, the U.S. PPI generally excludes imported goods, whereas tariffs directly increase the cost of these imported goods for consumers, contributing to a higher CPI. Second, businesses might initially absorb some tariff costs to remain competitive, but these costs eventually get passed on to consumers. Third, the PPI and CPI cover different baskets of goods and services. Tariffs heavily impact certain consumer goods, directly affecting the CPI basket more than the broader PPI. There's also a lag effect. As pre-tariff inventories are depleted, consumer prices rise. It's a complex economic stew indeed.
A truly complex economic stew indeed, Chloe. Thank you for untangling these intricate economic threads for us this morning. It certainly gives us a clearer picture of the balancing act ahead for the Federal Reserve and the impact on American households.
My pleasure, Grace.
Here are some other headlines. In New York, the bill is coming due for Nadine Menendez, the wife of disgraced former Senator Bob Menendez. She faces sentencing today for her role in a bribery scandal that prosecutors say traded political influence for a lifestyle of luxury. It seems the gold standard of corruption doesn't come with a get-out-of-jail-free card. A 2022 raid on the couple's home uncovered nearly $500,000 in cash stuffed into clothing, along with gold bars valued at over $150,000. Among the lavish bribes was a Mercedes-Benz convertible, which prompted a text from Nadine to her husband saying, "Congratulations, mon amour de la vie. We are the proud owners of a 2019 Mercedes." While prosecutors are seeking at least 7 years behind bars, her defense is pleading for a sentence of 1 year or less, citing a recent breast cancer diagnosis. Her husband, Bob Menendez, is already serving an 11-year sentence for his part in the pay-to-play scheme. Meanwhile, Mexico is building a tariff wall of its own, announcing new import taxes of up to 50% on over 1,400 products from Asian countries. This taxing situation is seen as a direct response to U.S. pressure over claims that China is using Mexico as a backdoor to bypass American tariffs. The new policy will primarily affect China, Mexico's second-largest trading partner, hitting goods from light vehicles and auto parts to electronics and textiles. President Sheinbaum's administration says the move is an important one, designed to protect domestic industries. But analysts suggest it also serves as a powerful bargaining chip for future trade negotiations with the United States. For President Donald Trump, it's a case of one step forward and one step back in his campaign to reshape the Federal Reserve. The step forward: his nominee for the Fed's board, Stephen Miran, has advanced out of the Senate Banking Committee, bringing him closer to a confirmation vote. However, Trump took a step back when a federal court blocked his attempt to fire a sitting Fed governor, Lisa Cook, ruling the administration had not provided sufficient cause. The move highlights the ongoing struggle over the central bank's independence, with critics calling the efforts an, quote, authoritarian power grab that could put the global economy in jeopardy. In a stunning reversal out of Memphis, former police officer Demetrius Haley is being released from federal custody. A judge has ordered a new trial for Haley and two other former officers in the federal civil rights case connected to the death of Tyree Nichols. The decision was made after it came to light that the original judge, who has since recused himself, had made comments suggesting a potential bias. He allegedly theorized that at least one officer had gang affiliations and that the Memphis Police Department was infiltrated to the top. The risk of bias was deemed, quote, too high to be constitutionally tolerable, granting the officers a new trial set for August of next year. And finally, a federal judge has put a major Trump-era immigration policy on hold, blocking a rule that would have cut off access to social services like the Head Start preschool program and health clinics for immigrants in the country illegally. The ruling, which affects 20 states and the District of Columbia, came from a judge appointed by President Trump himself. She expressed skepticism over the administration's rushed reinterpretation of the decades-old public charge rule, which opponents have called a discriminatory wealth test. For now, the policy is at a legal roadblock while the case is fully litigated. That's all we have for now. Today's episode was made by Alexander King, with Claude Sonnet 4.0, Gemini Pro 2.5, Gemini Flash 2.5, and Google Cloud Text-to-Speech. I hope you have a great day. I'll see you tomorrow, Alex.